for coming out. Yeah, really appreciate it. Sorry it took a little while, as I've been kind of procrastinating, and so we can get all the information in time together, but hope put together a pretty good presentation. Since it's the smaller kind of audience in general, if there's anything that you'd like to kind of get into or have any questions, please feel free just to shoot it out there.
Do you want to use your mic?
What's that?
Do you want to use the mic?
Oh, sure.
I normally would say I don't care, but I just don't know how the sound's going to be on this video. Is it working?
Cool. Yeah, so it's working.
Okay.
Cool. So talk tonight is on, we're just kind of continuing our little lecture series that we've been doing every month. We did terpenes our first time, kind of information going deeper on science of terpenes and how they relate to cannabis and how they help to distinguish effect and judge quality. Last month we did one on kind of pesticides and kind of the major issues that kind of pesticides pose, both from a patient and public health standpoint, but also from just being a cultivator and trying to come in line with regulations and compliance with kind of coming regulations. This month we're going to focus kind of more in and around the microbiology conversation of microbes and cannabis. It's I think it's one of the most unknown or least what's the word? I don't know. There's this kind of just running idea that least recognized issue, it's so. The microbe topic is a difficult one, I think, to get into because everybody thinks that microbes are just bad, but I think you need to open that up a little bit, what microbes are, and how we, the world we live in, and how microbes are actually ubiquitously around us at all times that we breathe in, from penicillin and Aspergillus that are in the air right now, and just how microbes being a part of our natural environment relate to health and wellness, both from recognizing the stomach microbiome that we have to kind of support a healthy immune system and immune function, and how the microbiome is your major defense kind of for your immune system to warding off any potential bad pathogenic microbes that might come along come your way. But I think it's important to kind of separate out what could be considered pathogenic versus probiotic. But in this presentation, we're going to focus a bunch on that. We're going to focus on kind of this document that came out called the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia's monograph on cannabis inflorescence, and it's a document that has largely been adopted by states and regulators that are trying to kind of put limits in place for cannabis regulations, but they've incredibly misused it. And so I'd like to kind of spend a little time focusing on the HP monograph, the way it was supposed to be used and the way it's been improperly used. And when it comes to the micro topic specifically, what constitutes a pass or fail with regards to different limits of the different microbes that we test for here at SC Labs. So we'll get into a bit of around the environment with considerations to managing microbes and best practices that can be taken to minimize bringing in pathogenic microbes while also kind of trying to create an ecosystem, a mini ecosystem where you're partnering and teaming up with microbes that are beneficial. And so from there kind of try to get a little bit to how micro information can help to empower can help to empower the process of overall evaluation of the quality of medicine and what you might want to do with it. If something has too high levels of, say, yeast and mold, or is visible powdery mildew all over it, doesn't mean it's bad or harmful. And there's lots of things that you can still do with that material. Do full kind of plant extraction with the solvent and turn the whole batch into live resin, and the solvent acts to sterilize any micro presence. And so there's many things that you can do to post-process or deal with what might be the sky's falling contamination on a certain grow, but yet actually could be processed into a secondary product that might be even more valuable than just the flower itself. And so, then kind of you get a little bit into microbial reduction, like it's called a microbial reduction step, and different tools that other industries use to kind of deal with the micro issue, which kind of go for anywhere from using UVC lighting, which has natural sterilizer properties, to partnering and using things like peroxide and oxidate, especially whenever using water as a solvent to make extracts and do water hash. Unless you're doing something to sterilize the water, or to have run through the plant material that might have bacteria or fungus on it, water acts like a surfboard, in a big way, and will essentially just carry over any type of living bacteria or fungus that might be on a plant, just essentially concentrating it in the extract. And we see water extracts that are hash be among the highest detection rates for many of the different organisms that we test for. And we'll spend a little bit of time on integrated pest management, which is the teaming with microbes approach towards preventing pests and pathology, and just kind of getting a little bit into how the microbiome of the soil, the living soil, is a lot like the microbiome of our gut, and how when you have a healthy gut microbiome, you're pretty strongly defended against any type of outside invaders. Very similar to how living soil, its microbiome, and whenever it's thriving, is all you need to treat or prevent any type of potential plant pathogen or bug that might come along. Cool. So yeah, just kind of jumping right into it. I don't know if anybody's seen or familiar with this document, but this is basically, it was a document created by the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia. It's an organization based out of Santa Cruz, where a lot of us are from, and a gentleman by the name of Roy Upton, he's the executive director of this organization. And the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, they create multiple monographs a year for different products and herbs. Cannabis is not anything new to them, other than it's just the first kind of a federally regulated crop that they've ever done a monograph on. But they pump out, I think, 12 to 15 monographs a year on different herbal products, different herbal supplements that are, different superfood type products that are starting to be imported in the United States, or different teas, traditional Chinese medicines, et cetera, et cetera. And the monograph is to, fully kind of help to, identify what types of analyses should be done, what types of instruments could be used to do the analysis, to test for the different compounds that might be in that medicine or herb, and the different quality control aspects. So it's like a compendium to help both regulators, but producers and processors, and macroscopic identification of plant attributes, but also kind of different plant chemicals and what the plant produces. So it's kind of an all-in-one compendium for. It's a really good document if you've ever read it or have a copy of it. But it's essentially becoming a guiding document for virtually all regulation in cannabis. The city of Berkeley adopted their testing standards essentially directly out of the AHP monograph. The state of Colorado, as well as the state of Washington, they both pretty much copied and pasted their regulations and limits imposed for the different tests they require from the monograph. And if you follow California's regulation, both with MCSRA as well as with AUMA, the Adult Use Bill, both of them highly cite the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia's monograph on cannabis as the main guiding kind of document for their the decision on what limits they're going to put in place. So getting a little further into it, this is the specific part out of the monograph. You can't really probably see it or the small fine print, but we could make this presentation available to anybody if you'd like. But these are the pages basically that specifically pertain to the micro topic within the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia's monograph on cannabis. And if you look at this chart right here, what's really interesting is I'm kind of leading to the fact that pretty much all the regulators, they didn't even read the document. They just they saw this chart, they're like, oh, it's a chart about microbiology. Boom, they basically copied and pasted it, put it as the law, of the land of what will constitute something to be able to pass or fail and be sold or not sold in the regulated market. And pretty much all these regulators, from Berkeley to the state of Washington, the state of Colorado, they all didn't read this document. If they read these paragraphs, and if they really read this chart, they would have known that the chart, this is table 9, it's like microbial and fungal limits recommended for orally consumed botanical products. So this chart was only supposed to be used to create guideline type baseline limits for these different microorganisms for on kind of oral and consumed products. So tincture, or not tincture, sorry, like baked products, Twinkies, brownies, different food products people are making in the kitchen. And this chart is kind of just recommended kind of limits that they were putting in place. So this chart was never meant or intended to be used as a pass-fail criteria for flowers. It wasn't just supposed to be used as pass-fail period, even for edibles. But when it comes down to botanical herbal products or for hash, this wasn't at all meant to be used in that way. And so the states, and the regulators, they pretty much ignorantly kind of took out these charts, put them in place, and that became the law of the land. But if you specifically read these paragraphs, it very effectively spells out how these microbes are supposed to be used. And I'll read a little bit from this excerpt from Roy Upton. He had written this response kind of to send to regulators around how they were using and improperly using his document. So I'm just going to read this parts of it. So the term microbiological impurities assumes the presence of microbes is inappropriate or harmful. This is an inaccurate assumption. Microbes are a natural part of all botanical products, and most that occur on cannabis and on plant material in general are not human pathogens. The premise of all regulations regarding microbial loads is to limit or minimize the potential for the presence of microbial pathogens, things that are pathogenic to humans like E. coli, O157, salmonella, different types of mycotoxins. Those are really what regulators want to kind of get behind and regulate, not any microbe that's there, because most microbes are benign. So on the regulatory side, this should be the focus of inspections and requirements. Otherwise, generally speaking, microbial limits are designed to be applied to process controls by manufacturers to prevent contamination. Excuse me, sorry. There we go. Microbial limits are designed to be applied within process controls by manufacturers or to prevent contamination of pathogens or deterioration of products. Plants, such as cannabis, that have great concentration of trichomes, are prone to high yeast and mold counts as trichomes gather moisture. An anonymously high rainy season can result in yeast and mold counts that can be logs higher than typical years of drought. Higher than normal yeast and mold counts do not necessarily result in a material degradation of the product, and in itself, values are not grounds for rejection of material. Oh. Oops. Sorry.
We couldn't read it anyways.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, again, I told us in this anyway. So higher than normal yeast and mold counts do not necessarily result in the material degradation of the product, and in itself, values are not grounds for rejection of material. Rather, they're used to check the processes that may give rise to the potential for contamination, and therefore, they should be microbes should be used by they should be applied by producers more than they should by regulators. Regulators should focus on requiring the absence of pathogens that may be likely to occur on cannabis. So, kind of just in summary, he's really strong, has a very strong position on this. Because, regulations could get just way overbearing because of, for what purpose, yeast and mold levels are, most yeast and mold are benign, not pathogenic. Even things like powdery mildew. Powdery mildew is what most people see and consider as bad, but it's not a human pathogen. Powdery mildew is a plant pathogen, and it's barely an allergen. There are certain people that have super heightened sensitivity to, fungal loads and yeast and mold and stuff like that, and can have slight allergies to the presence of yeast, of powdery mildew, or even say botrytis. But largely those compounds, those microbes are pretty much harmless, and especially for somebody that's got an average or above average healthy immune system. So if your stomach microbiome is somewhat strong, you're doing your probiotics, drinking your sauerkraut juice and stuff, chances are powdery mildew, most aerobic bacteria, are not really ever going to harm you very much. So again, it's the pathogenic microbes that should be concerning, and those are what regulators should focus around instead of kind of trying to restrict how much powdery mildew is on a bud. So moving on from here, so this is essentially cut and copied right out of the Berkeley Municipal Code, and they just pretty much copied and pasted straight out of the monograph, these limits. And what's funny is they even cut this typo and totally effed up, because they said pretty much yeast and mold 10 CFU. It's not a case that nobody would pass anything if that was the case, and everybody would have to steam sterilize any node, zap any terpenes off of it in the process of growing cannabis. Limits were put in place like that. But kind of just starting to get into a little more environment. Cannabis is a plant grown out of the earth, and it's microbes are part of the whole reality. But how do you minimize the kind of microbes that might lead towards potential contamination of a crop, and what are some of the things that you can do to minimize those? And so in so many ways, this topic is very regional. So it's where's the geography where you're growing cannabis? Is it coastal? In Fort Bragg, in Santa Cruz, Davenport, you're gonna have you deal with higher humidity levels that and high humidity for sustained periods of time are the specific things that proliferate microbes to grow. And so the geography plays a major role. The overall cleanliness and sterility of a grow and how it's done. If it's just kind of outside and just full sun, which is awesome. But do you have people just driving in and out and just kicking up dirt all over the plants? There's so many things that you can do to help or to really assist in creating really elevated levels of bacteria and fungus. But ultimately, just in general, you want to minimize those because whether even though they're not human pathogens, they're plant pathogens, so they're going to eat at and degrade the quality of the overall crop, and lead to things like crop loss, lead to the devaluing of the crop, and lead to the kind of shortened shelf life kind of the crop. And so by minimizing microbiology and by teaming with the right microbes and cutting them out at the right times, people can mitigate all the potential issues while maximizing the benefit of growing cannabis and not having bacteria, fungus being an issue. But certain people these days are using UVC, which is a type of a spectrum of light that sterilizes. The sun produces UVA, UVB, and UVC, and is largely completely absent in virtually all indoor grown cannabis. And even in certain greenhouse material, the UV will be blocked. But when it comes to breaking down residual pesticides, as well as helping to sterilize the surface areas of the plant, the UV, A, B, and C from the sun is the biggest thing that does that, and naturally. And so if you're growing indoor under lighting, people are starting more and more to look towards UVC wands, where they'll go treat their plants while they're standing, some at regular times, a couple times a week, what have you. So people have these UVC wands on light rollers that basically fully every day just go back and forth across the entirety of their greenhouse, to where at some point throughout the day, each plant's getting treated with a little blast of UV, and that people are seeing a lot of benefit from that. But yeah, other than that, kind of overall cleanliness, best practices in keeping the bugs out. When you go to the so many people just swap and share genetics, broaden how that broad mites are around and russet mites, just wreaking havoc in people's gardens, destroying everything, forcing organic people to have to spray with systemic, forbidden other types of pesticides. It's so much of this is about best practices and how you keep your garden and quarantine things that you bring in, and kind of anything you bring in, you immediately have on some type of protocol of treating with organic pesticides and biological compounds so that you can work through and kind of get some of these issues mitigated. But then also it's like, when you go to the hydro store, the hydro store is like the international airport for spider mites. Like they come into somebody, people will bring their diseased, mighty leaves and plant into a hydro store, like, what is this? Help me! And they're just like leaving their shit on the, on the counter, and somebody just comes over and just swoops them over and takes them with them back to their spot. It's like if you go into most hydro stores, you'll notice that they don't have a lot of plants, like live plants. Like some do, like they'll have little like demos in kind of a little hydro hut or something, tents. But largely, a lot of hydro stores they don't have like living real plants because you'll typically see covered with spider mites or other types of bugs. So it's really important to kind of quarantine yourself. Whenever you're kind of just being mindful about the ways that you can be a vector and bring in or kind of prevent bringing in kind of different types of invaders. Because as we're getting closer to regulation, your hands are going to be pretty tied if you are growing herb, from spraying certain types of pesticides. So you're gonna have to be that much more vigilant in the way you conduct yourself and how you kind of go into your room, and how many hippies you allow just come into your garden and just grab buds and sniff it, and those types of things are like really big issues. Like whenever whenever you consider that the state's going to put regulations in place that might create a failure for having certain types of bacteria or fungus. If we at SC Labs have any effect, hopefully, I'll tell you a little bit later, but we're working currently with American Herbal Pharmacopoeia to create a white paper on microbes and cannabis so that we can help to add clarity to the way that these limits are currently being used and improperly used, so that we can hopefully not straight up hamstring the farmer, because it's like you're already kind of getting limited in what options are whenever you can't spray certain pesticides that are approved in agricultural use, and you're led to only being able to use organic products or biological products. But being significantly regulating that side of it too, isn't good for anybody. And whenever you really look at it and the true public health concern or perspective, it's kind of a non-issue with a lot of these microbes. Cannabis has been consumed for thousands of years. There's very little to no toxicological data showing or suggesting that many people die a year or get hurt a year from smoking moldy weed. And certain cultures like in Malawi, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Malawi cobs. Malawi cobs were this somewhat, it seems like it had a Darwinian kind of dead end at some point, but it was a way that they used to cure weed, and they'd take like fresh spears of cannabis that they harvested, and they would there was a whole preparation, but they would like wrap it in banana leaf of some type, and they'd kind of tie it up string so it's wrapped up kind of in this banana leaf cigar wet, and then they would like bury it underground and put some type of like hot coals or something over it, and then over some period of time they would unbury it and smoke this like dark beat up whatever it turned into. So it's interesting to think what type of bacteria and fungus was on that. It's like that might have killed a few people and they might have moved away from that, but yeah, it's that's just a trip. I don't even know about that. But anyway,
yes, I like it.
So then getting further, kind of it's like part of the environmental considerations. It's like amendments and inputs. One of the really one of the really big things, like the vectors of broad mites and russet mites into the cannabis community. These things didn't exist. Like in the cannabis community for so long, and all of a sudden they're here and they're just smashing everybody, and it's so hard to find and see. They're microscopic, and you know, I haven't actually done full kind of fact check on this, but a really tuned in kind of amendment group up here in Northern California kind of was filling me in about how russet mites, it's either russet mites, I'm pretty sure russet mites or bottom mites, but they all of a sudden started coming in once big vineyards started mulching their grape holes, and you know, this type of bug, you know, and the eggs from it would stick around from this compost, you know, among other things like Eagle 20. You know, it's fascinating how much compost is out in the market right now that is made from not necessarily organic sources. Like people will source like municipal lawn trimmings that's treated from imidacloprid, and then turn that into compost, you know, that they then sell as organic to organic farmers who are building their soil, and then they're basically just taking imidacloprid, you know, dosed compost, and then building it into the dirt, you know, and then having this huge kind of residual effect happen because it doesn't break down, you know, it breaks down even slower than it would if it were sprayed at the plant. So that's a huge issue. And then same thing, you know, you know, the eggs of this certain invasive species, you know, kind of like the way eucalyptus came in, you know, and unintendedly took over the landscape. It's like, you know, this bug was kind of factored in from this dirty compost stores that people started, you know, turning a profit, making, so everybody, you know, started had to do something with the holes in their grapes, and so, you know, start turning it all in compost, and you know, all of a sudden then boom, you know, these types of bugs are here, and they're really hard to treat and get rid of. So it's you know, it's super important just to kind of, you know, as part of your due diligence and building your farm, it's like, you know, vetting the sources of your amendments and your inputs and what you're getting and what you're bringing in. You know, just like you're vetting, you know, what kind of genetics from who you're bringing in. These things are really, really important. But then I think most important, really, like is like temperature and humidity controls. You know, like 80+% of the ability to control and prevent pests and pathology so much lies in the environment. You know, and how something's set up, a container at which, you know, you maintain or create massive fluctuations between the day and the nighttime, between temperatures and humidity. You know, and you know, I can't tell you how many people I know that they always kind of in building grow rooms or kind of getting set up, they so often kind of pinch pennies on the places that they should invest most. You know. And you know, they'll go like super ham and get, you know, the full advanced nutrient hydro line of 30 products or something, thinking that they could just like nutrient their way out of it. But then they'll, you know, kind of half-ass their air conditioning, temperature, humidity controls, you know, and you know, virtually, you know, anytime humidity starts to go out of range, you know, especially during the night cycle of the plant, you know, you have this glandular trichome producing plant that's just getting denser and tighter and sticky. I mean, it's you know, yeast and mold and moisture gathering in that is the biggest issue. And so you know, from sustained, you know, periods of humidity spiking, you know, that's where, you know, bacteria and the different types of yeast and mold proliferate. And just kind of an example of that is like light deprivation herb. There, you know, so many people. Some of my favorite herb I prefer to smoke, you know, is you know, under the sun grown, and you know, people are growing light dep herb that competes with indoor these days. But if you look from the testing standpoint of most light dep herb, all of it has consistently, pretty much, I mean, like a huge percentage of all light dep herb has above 100,000 CFUs, which are colony forming units. So the measure of how you read microbiology, CFUs per gram, colony forming units per gram. And so, yeah, so on light dep herb, you know, what's essentially happening is, you know, you have a row of cannabis that, you know, you're trying to cut off the light at a certain point so you can induce flowering, so you can kind of pull off multiple runs a year. And what you end up saying is, you know, you take black plastic tarp and you fully cover a whole row of plants, and you know, that's kind of like taking a humidity dome and putting over a tray of clones, you know. And so that's, you know, that's typically what's happening, with people growing indoor and also people that are growing light depth, and that's that, they create these conditions where, mitigate these issues, and then again, not have to spray tons of gnarly pesticides on them that, ultimately aren't good for people to smoke and aren't good for, your ability to make it through regulation once, you're not allowed to sell your weed anymore because it has pesticides on it. So yes, kind of some things beyond that you can do for environment to control micro and different issues is, things like companion planting, working with predatory bugs. Those are more on the side of kind of pest control and pathogen, pathology control for micro. But yeah, so kind of just further getting into this, distinguishing the difference between what are pathogens versus what are probiotics. There's a difference between plant pathogens and human pathogens. As I was saying earlier, kind of powdery mildew and botrytis are not human pathogens. They're plant pathogens. So they attack the plant's immune system, degrade the overall quality and life of the plant, and this that results in a loss of fruits and loss of overall quality. But they're not necessarily harmful to people for people to smoke. I think it's a lot more cut and dry to make a distinction between the presence or absence of systemic pesticides made by Dow Chemical or these big agribusiness companies that basically are mimicking kind of these different nerve agents that used to be used. And then the difference between those and true human pathogens, because it's like if again the job of regulators is to create overbearing regulations to limit the types of products and the innovative products that give me the market. It's to minimize the things that could be potential public health issues, things like human pathogens. So Jake, if you really want to get into the human pathogen conversation, what you're really talking about is things like E. coli 0571, which is a type of pathogenic coliforms. At SC Labs we test for total coliforms, but most of the coliforms that are around are pretty much benign as well. The pathogenic coliform that's most known is E. coli 0571. There's a couple other types, but most of these human pathogenic microbes, one of the biggest reasons why they're pathogenic isn't because Aspergillus flavus is a pathogen. It's because Aspergillus flavus produces a secondary metabolite called a mycotoxin, which is like you can't kill mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are kind of like pesticides in that. If you have living Aspergillus flavus, which is a pathogenic microbe that produces mycotoxins, if you had it growing in cannabis, you could sterilize that. You could run it with butane and sterilize it, or run it with alcohol or something and sterilize it. But the secondary metabolites that those microbes produced, namely like aflatoxins, these different mycotoxins, they're like secondary metabolite proteins that stick around and carry over and residually stain people's machines, and those the mycotoxins are what really should be being tested for the public health consumer standpoint, much more than really giving two shits about whether or not yeast and mold levels are above 100,000, or aerobic bacteria is above 1 million. Those are kind of inconsequential pretty much to public health. And again, really are more indicator organisms to help determine and evaluate quality. So as I was kind of getting into, so most of the mycotoxins that are around are produced from certain species of Aspergillus. So you have Aspergillus fumigatus, Aspergillus flavus, Aspergillus parasiticus, and Aspergillus niger. And so these four Aspergillus species, they produce mycotoxins like aflatoxin G1, aflatoxin G2, B1, and B2. B1 is the most toxic, carcinogenic, cancer-causing. And then you have other ones called ochratoxin. There's ochratoxin, secondary metabolite A, B, and C. And ochratoxin comes from certain types of pathogenic penicillium and Aspergillus. But again, those words, like penicillium and Aspergillus, penicillium and Aspergillus are pretty much in the air right now. It's like they're ubiquitous microorganisms that are in all the air, all around us. And so most pathogens, or most of these microbes are, again, pretty much benign and not pathogenic or not harmful. It's just these certain ones that are bad. And then, so really, it's important to define what those pathogens are. And you notice that powdery mildew is not on there. You notice that botrytis, which is gray mold, is not on there. It's because they don't produce mycotoxins, and they're largely rather benign. And so therefore shouldn't be. So therefore, yeast and mold levels shouldn't be used as kind of blanket pass-fail criteria, for somebody to determine whether or not something's safe to smoke. I mean, again, if there's 100 parts per million of Eagle 20 on it, I think that's pretty cut and dry. But if you're at 100,001 CFUs of yeast and mold or aerobic bacteria, that's again largely inconsequential to the health of whether or not somebody smokes is going to get sick. And if they were used right, the microbes would be they'd be used to grade quality, to arrive at what price somebody's going to pay for a product, and to determine the overall shelf life of something. If you had a batch of herb that even that somebody did a good job, maybe say and sprayed organic compost tea on it with beneficial bacteria, and did all the teaming with microbe stuff right. But even doing that right, you can do it wrong, because you can spray those microbes too late, like in the flower. People will spray compost teas in week 3 and 4 and stuff in flower when you're starting to get bud production. But then when you look at the micro test, very oftentimes, that batch will have over 1 million CFUs, or colony forming units per gram, for things like aerobic bacteria, and typically when you have high microbes, you have other high microbes, unless you did an effective job in using certain biofungicides to keep away certain microbes. But yeah, I mean, if something has over 1 million CFUs of yeast and mold, or of bacteria, and over 100,000 CFUs of yeast and mold, does that mean it's harmful? No, it doesn't. But if you put that on the shelf next to something that was ultra clean and it sat there for 6 months, if you kind of went back and looked at the overall kind of look and smell and bag appeal of the strain, you'll notice that what had a higher microbe load, was much quicker to degrade and to start losing its its overall, kind of appeal from a fresh, stinky standpoint. And so again, it's like I think the progressive way to use microlimits isn't to just, discriminate and deny kind of something that might have a little bacteria or fungus on it. It's more to use as a way of grading the quality and whether or not something will smoke. But when it really comes down to it too, I think it's important to differentiate and distinguish between the true sick versus your average person that's using cannabis, because when it really and I have a slide on this actually. Here I'll actually get into that in a sec. So yeah, total yeast and mold. These are some of the plates from our lab. The kind of like black hole looking things, that's mold, versus all the little dots, which are yeast. And there's different types of yeast, different types of mold that grow on these plates that we use. The plates we use are a 3M Petri film. It's a pretty standard microbiology plate that is used ubiquitously in the food industry and dairy and pharmaceutical industry, stuff like that. But yeah, so that's kind of what they look like. This is actually a picture of a pathogenic Aspergillus type. I forgot which one, but yeah, I kind of said this, contrary to popular belief, powdery mildew is plant pathogen, not a human pathogen. Same thing with botrytis. And then, yeah, certain species that are bad are these Aspergillus species that produce mycotoxins. One thing that is interesting is that mycotoxins, the Aspergillus types that bring in mycotoxins, they don't grow on the plant. They're not native to growing on cannabis. They're vectored in from certain types of bugs. It's like whiteflies. So it's like, if you've ever seen whiteflies to come hit your garden, they're rather easy to control, if you're kind of on it, unless you're just kind of gone. I've seen people that are just absent from even going there for weeks. And then it was the first time I saw like a whitefly infestation. But it's like whiteflies are a pretty easy bug to kind of control. But whiteflies are the biggest vector that bring in bacteria, or bring in the pathogenic types of Aspergillus. And a vector is an organism, often an invertebrate arthropod, that transmits a pathogen from reservoir to host of pathogenic Aspergillus that produces microtoxins, are the pest whitefly. So whiteflies are the biggest vector to carry in pathogenic types of Aspergillus. So then these are the total aerobic plate, total aerobic plates. These ones right here. Well, so this one's total aerobic plate. I'm sorry, this one, and then these two are coliforms, total coliforms. Coliforms are a type of fecal bacteria. And so like organic farmers, and most of them are benign, but it's like if somebody's kind of applying guano or like chicken shit or something, top dressing their plants, it's like, how is that applied? Are they just throwing it and dusting kind of some of the bottom branches that are not very cleared up or cleared or kept up, because just throwing shit kind of and spreading dust, kind of buds that are sticky, can be something that very quickly bring about higher coliform levels in your herb. Not necessarily that they're super bad, but I'd be a little more concerned of coliforms in general than some of the other microbes. But again, largely most of them are benign. So with aerobic bacteria, we do use the aerobic plate count, and yeah, so aerobic plate count tests for all different types of aerobic bacteria, all kinds of different types of aerobic bacteria. But aerobic bacteria are one of the major types of microbes that you're partnering with when you team with microbes and try to prevent pests and pathology. They're one of the most common types of microbe that are in most compost tea. Although a truly awesomely brewed compost tea that's most effective for cannabis is typically like a 1-to-1 fungal to bacterial ratio. Most people's compost tea programs are rather dominant in just bacteria. And so bacterial dominant teas, that's what people use. And then there's other types of biological fungicides and biological insecticides that people use to instead of spraying to keep away pests and pathology using Eagle 20 or systemics, people will use beneficial microorganisms, things like serenade. Serenade's a Bacillus subtilis, certain types of lactobacillus. It's funny and similar how much like the probiotics we take into our body are similar to probiotics that the plant like most thrives off of. And it's really funny because it really hits this like as above, so below theme. The deeper you kind of like look into it and peel that one back. But BS, Bacillus subtilis, that's what's in serenade. Serenade's a beneficial bacteria that you spray on plants that basically keep away, prevent spores from coming about. But it's part of an integrated pest management approach. You can't just spray that on contaminated plants that have powdery mildew in their plant systemically. It's more a part of a long prevention approach towards keeping it away by always having plants inoculated with beneficial organisms instead. Because the more beneficial that are inoculated on the leaf surface of a plant, the more they're going to fight off the presence of anything bad that might be a plant pathogen. So again, it's similar to the way our stomach microbiome is majority of our immune system function. Whenever we have trillions, there's more cells of alien bacteria in our body than there are cells of human in us. And so we are more kind of microbiome, kind of when it comes down to it at a cellular level, than we are a human being individually. And so it's like the health of your microbiome is one of the things that's going to be most to your aid whenever invader microbes come your way, because you always got this army ready to rage and crush anything that comes about. But that's a big difference between somebody that's gone through full radiation, chemotherapy, multi kind of rounds of antibiotics. Whenever you have no microbiome, the presence of any microbe could be bad. And so we'll get more into it here in a little bit, but I think the microbe conversation is most truly represented whenever you distinguish the difference between the most of medical cases when you're truly dealing with that 1% of patient that is ultra immunocompromised, no microbiome, versus, your average patient who, kind of is, all use is medical use, but most people that are using cannabis have somewhat of a rare, regular or balanced or average or above average, stomach microbiome, gut health. And so for most people, any type of microbe, from eating that, 6-hour-old avocado, or like that slightly spoiled food or whatever, that we come in contact with every day, usually nothing's going to be very harmful to you, but that's, so your average person smoking powdered mildew, smoking whatever, it's kind of inconsequential, and they're not going to be hurt. But I think it's really important to draw that line and define the difference between true medical use, because if somebody's got no microbiome and is completely sterilized, essentially their gut, they should choose medicines more off sterility, no pesticides, no bacteria or fungus growing on it. They should be choosing more off sterility than they should, choosing off, whether or not they smoke this strain or that. Most collectives and true medical advice would be to guide those types of patients away from even smoking cannabis, because it's not even worth the shot, the chance. I mean, it's like if you have no microbiome, it's like you don't know what kind of random microbes or coliforms or whatever, or Aspergillus might be on it. And since you're in such a compromised state, you might be of the most to be impacted by it, and most to have the potential of coming down with some type of upper respiratory infection or aspergillosis or whatever. And so those types of patients should be being guided to sterilized, high potency, high cannabinoid extracts, so they can take therapeutic doses of cannabinoids, while having no issue of potential bacteria or fungus on the plant or pesticides. I think sterility is most important for those types of patients. But I think that's like the most important really thing that distinguishes and differentiates what the most tight regulation on medical would look like versus what it should be like for most regulated cannabis. And I'll actually, so getting into this microbial reduction step, I'll tell you a quick story about Bedrocan. I don't know if you're familiar with the Dutch government program for growing cannabis, but in the Netherlands, there's the coffee shop model, which is the recreational model that people go to coffee shops. It's largely unregulated, blah blah blah. But then there's the medical system, and so the medical system, basically there's one company that has a monopoly on growing for the Dutch government, and they're called Bedrocan. And this company Bedrocan, they found they grow everything indoor. And they, in the European Union, they have really, really tight standards around what microbes are allowed, period. And so what they found at Bedrocan is they couldn't grow cannabis that tested below the European Union levels. And so due to that fact, 100% of all the herb that Bedrocan grows gets gamma irradiated and zapped, like produce kind of that goes in a lot of stores, kind of Safeway, this and that. And so gamma radiation zaps everything. There's got to be some type of effect on terpene, the essential oils of the plant that show how fresh or great something is. And so when people are judging judging cannabis off kind of terpene preservation and quality, it's like gamma radiation kind of seems like a non-option for most people. But if there's too strict regulation on the medical system, there might be forced, people might have to, they're forced to do some type of microbial reduction step to where they can get down to this level of cleanliness. But I think one of the biggest microbial reduction steps that people can use are fucking dehumidifiers. So you just invest the first time right in enough dehumidification to control day and night. Because again, most people they go way bigger on their nutrients than they go on just getting the right AC system or the right dehumidifier. When that's 80% of the success and whether or not you're going to get problems ahead. But then, people are using UVC, which is, again, a sterilizing method. People are putting UVC in their water. There's UVC water filters. There's people are using it in process. So as you can see these pictures right here, this is one of the really cool ways I've seen it used. It's like on a full kind of roller, like a light roller. and just straight across, and then just slowly across the day spans the entire span of this acreage of a greenhouse. And then the one right underneath it is a really cool application I've seen. People will basically, because UVC, it sterilizes, but it doesn't go past the surface area of what you're sterilizing. So if you were trying to take some really moldy or like high microbial loaded, kind of nug that you ground up, and then you could put on a conveyor belt, or like granular hash, water hash, keef, you could kind of, that's not a bud, that's like broken up or granular. You could have it on a conveyor belt that essentially is going underneath, these UVC treatment spots that just blast down and treat whatever's passing under it. And that was one of the really clever ways I saw some people use it, because I saw them using it for water hash, because they were really big water hash makers. And so they were both putting UV through kind of the water, and then they were also putting UV, kind of blasting with UV. It's not entirely known, how much or how little degradation of terpenes is happening from applying UV, but it's a lot less degradation than using ozone. A lot of people use ozone, not a lot of people. People are using ozone for different applications, but if you put an ozone generator inside of your grow room and you turn it on, like late flower, it'll take away all the smell of your plants. Just zap the entire smell, And, I've actually known people that, ruined essentially like a 10 lighter from doing that. And so that was smart. But yeah, so there's other ways, like in the agriculture industry, people use this thing called ethylene oxide, ETO. That's one of the ways. But I hope nobody ever treats cannabis with ETO. And I hope people find other ways. But I think one of the best ways to the microbial reduction steps is using a solvent. So many people, it's really fascinating, because up to this point, prior to opening up SC Labs, I used to work within the hydroponic industry, do like a lot of consulting, helping people, talking people off the edge of like dousing their whole room with, kind of an Eagle 20 or forbid, when they're like 4 weeks into flower, because they're just trying to hide the eyesore of having this powdery mildew or whatever all over their plant, and sorry, for Eagle 20 or Compass, people would use. But I would talk them off the ledge of using that, because it's like, dude, you're like week 4, you should never smoke that. You should never share that with somebody to smoke. That's like a really, really kind of disrespectful and kind of like unscrupulous use of that pesticide or that fungicide. And so I was like, dude, most farmers haven't built in. In larger farming, there's this whole idea of crop loss that's built into your overall projections and P&Ls. You kind of like have this projected crop loss in mind, just to like not put it all out there and all your eggs in the basket. Because the idea of crop loss in cannabis has been kind of something people have been willing to work with, kind of up to this point in the cowboy days of cannabis, because it's like, I'm get every gram out of this kind of thing, and so people have been willing to do some unscrupulous behaviors, spray with some gnarly pesticides, all to kind of, keep down people from seeing that it's got powdery mildew on it. But what we now know is that sticks around. The pesticides get caught up in the extraction process, and then these wreak havoc. And so it's like, I think in the future, it's like if you didn't do the prevention you needed to kind of keep control of the issue of having powdery mildew, it's like call it a loss. It's like, so you have to like let the whole thing go, and you get really bad powdery mildew, turn the whole thing into fresh frozen. It's like, that'd be fire. Go talk to Joe. And
hey, what's up?
You got clean trim, boom. But yeah, it's not the end of the world, and it's like, instead of spray something gnarly, it's like, take the licking that you needed to take and learn that you should have done more prevention ahead of time, and dedicate the whole thing into going, don't trim it, just have it blasted and turned into live resin. It's like, some people find out that was a better answer anyway, fully kind of getting to live resin where it's got unlimited demand versus sitting on huge packs of flowers that go bad. But anyway, that's kind of about it on microbial reduction step. Then yeah, I mean, we're pretty much getting towards the end here. So you know, the last bit was about integrated pest management, and you know, it's not a huge part of this presentation, but if there's any questions, you know, more than gladly answer. IPM is kind of one of my main passions. You know, it's how to properly and preventatively approach treating and keeping away pests that are invasive and pathogens that are invasive by kind of, you know, it's like this idea of like biomimicry. It's like looking to nature for more efficient engineering and design. There's this amazing conference called the Pioneers that happens over here in Marin. It's pretty sick. I've never been, but I really enjoy all the speakers and all the people and the information they have out there. Because yeah, I mean, you know, we slam our head into a lot of walls trying to figure out how to kind of do this, but it's like looking at the perfection of nature and the symbiotic relationship between the soil and just the whole like microbiome and the ecology of the plant and how that translates to health and, you know, kind of, you know, thriving plants. It's amazing. And so you know, I think the true kind of underground kind of the success of whether or not, you know, an organic IPM-based approach is effective is how much it's actually executed. You know, a lot of people get lazy. You know, everybody's busy. People are trying to grow 1,000 times bigger than they've ever grown. But you know, with IPM, it's like really about the methodical approach that you have that you never stray from. You know, that every time it's the same way. You know, that, you know, it's this whole idea of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Because, you know, it's like if you start with a baby, you know, whether it's one clone or 10,000 clones, it's like when you start with one clone, it's really easy to cover the full surface area of that plant. You know, you can just dip it in neem oil or whatever, spray it with serenade. You know, there's tons of organic options that you can use, you know, for pathology and for pest prevention. But you know, if you just have that methodical approach towards the one or the 10,000 clones, towards every week having them dipped or sprayed, you know, in this prevention way, you know, it's like from the time they're born to the time they get to be huge, vigorous plants, you'll have had built-in 10 different, you know, sprayings from, you know, so you're growing the plant up, being treated with these organic sprays, horticultural oils, peppermint oil, rosemary oil, you know, natural fungicides, bio compounds, compost teas, you know, using them in rotational ways. You know, you kind of just maximize the vigor and the life of the plant, and you kind of, you know, I mean, and then even if, you know, towards the end of your IPM, like whenever you're in veg, once you have big hedges, it's like you don't have to, you know, it's like if you try to cover, you know, so many plants at that point because you got a gnarly infestation, it's almost too late because there's so much plant material, so much surface area that you have to cover to get in front of it that, you know, you might as well just write it off again and call it a loss. You know, but if you did it right, you know, then, you know, even though towards the end when the plants are big and vegging, you know, even if you're not spraying every surface of the whole plant and all the leaves and everything, you know, you still did it every week before, and so you know, you're still keeping it up, and then, you know, whenever you set them into flower, you never spray them again. You know, it's chances are you don't have any problems, and if you do have problems with powdery mildew or bugs, it's really contained. You know, and so it's but again, it's so much about the systematic, methodical prevention approach that you take. And you know, because once you have that part down, then you can just sub in any type of, you know, bio fungicide or organic compound or, you know, neem oil or whatever, and you're golden. But you know, also you're working with companion plants, you're working with beneficial predatory bugs. Yeah, that's kind of the brunt of my presentation.
I have a question.